My name's Dominic Williamson, and thank you for joining us. As part of this webinar, it's really to help you get the most out of the online experience that you can have for remote learning, as well as also meeting then online from anywhere. As part of the agenda for the webinar that we're running together, you'll see here that we have three key focus areas. Firstly, if you're brand new to Microsoft Teams, you are in the right place. We'll be doing an overview of Teams meetings. We'll then also be covering, for those who are using Teams, really best practices to run an effective online meeting, particularly focused on with your students in a teaching scenario. And then we'll be finishing as part of today to make sure that you have then all of the resources that you need to be able to get started right now following this session. The goal of the webinar today is to really focus on how do you create online Teams meetings. And before I go through an overview of Microsoft Teams so you can see what the end result will look like, it will be this. You'll see here I'm going to switch from the slides over to the Microsoft Teams app. But for those who are brand new to Microsoft Teams, I just wanted to set the scene with a few slides to quickly then provide an overview if this is your first time using the Teams platform, and then we'll go hands-on with how do we create those online learning spaces. Microsoft Teams is the hub for teamwork, bringing everyone together into a single shared workspace where we can then chat, call, share files, work together in apps, and hold effective online meetings. Teams delivers a unique end-to-end meeting experience that brings back that human element of face-to-face collaboration while helping people stay focused before, during, and after the meeting itself. And one of the things that's particularly powerful about Microsoft Teams is it brings people together around the world across countries. And so this is where I'll just quickly switch back to the slides for another moment. And from the slides you'll see here, when I bring up the website, if you look at international availability for Microsoft Online Services, the only place right now that Microsoft Teams is not currently available is Cuba, Iran, the Democratic People's Republic of Korea, Sudan, and Syria. So this is where, again, this information is publicly available. Teams is available across countries, bringing together learners, not just across the country or across the city, but around the world itself into a single online learning space and online meeting space. So whether you're meeting with people from Australia, from China, from France, Germany, and many of the other countries that you see here as part of this public information, we can then have an online meeting together where we work and learn from one another in an online space that provides extremely powerful experiences to mimic what it's like when we're there together in person. And of course, to also make sure this is an inclusive experience. So it's available in many different languages available to you within the Teams client itself. So just wanted to share that there. The focus of the webinar today will be very much around what's capable with the free capabilities of Microsoft Teams. Microsoft Teams is available also across platforms. So the name Microsoft does not mean it is only available on Microsoft devices. You are able to use the Teams desktop app across Windows, Linux, and Mac devices, as well as also on tablets, whether your students have iPads, Android tablets, and of course on mobile phones as well, which is a top requirement that we see particularly for our students to be able to work together effectively, again, from their phone, just like when they're on their laptop. And so the Teams app is available on iPhone, Android, and also in the browser. So if you're using then a modern web browser like Edge, Chrome, this is where we have then the ability to use the Team app both on the desktop and also in the browser experience itself. To get the app, simply head to the App Store on your device of choice, and you can get a direct link by going to aka.ms/getteams. An effective online meeting or learning experience has three key parts: what happens with the setup before, how the meeting itself occurs during, and then what happens after the meeting has concluded. So what we're going to be focusing on is before scheduling your meeting, sharing resources, and preparing your meeting device. Then during, to present content to your attendees, to manage the conversation and collaborate together, and then record your session for later viewing. And then after, to access the meeting recordings and transcript with even the ability to search for keywords and topics, view responses to questions and conversations, and then to be able to continue and chat and collaborate in context of the documents and learning materials provided. So the first phase is what we're going to be focusing now is very much hands-on for how do you set up then your online Teams meeting. So let's get started with access to Microsoft Teams. And then we'll schedule the online meeting and make sure our device is ready for a good online meeting experience. To begin, simply go to office.com, log in with your staff email address, and you'll see here then all of the different apps that we have available to us. Now we're going to be focusing on Microsoft Teams. So by clicking on Teams, you'll see here, I've just already loaded it up. I can then access Teams in the web browser. As a best practice tip, if you are on your device that you will be using regularly, do make sure you install the desktop client because that gives you the most complete experience, and it's something that gives you all of the capabilities. When we have here, access for the browser is great, but if you can, I do recommend downloading the free desktop app. And again, that's available for Windows, Apple MacBooks, and Linux devices. For those who are new to Teams, you'll notice that right now I'm currently looking at the different teams that I'm a part of. What we're going to be focusing on though is how do we create a one-off ad hoc meeting as needed. But where I'm going to be focused right now is if I go over on that left-hand side here and click on Calendar. Now you'll notice the calendar here will show things that are also in your Outlook Exchange calendar because they are one and the same. Whether we go to Outlook or we come here to Teams, it uses the same Exchange online calendar, which is really fantastic. It means we have a single source of truth to be able to focus when we arrange our meetings. And to create a meeting, all I simply need to do, just like the online tutorial CS 102 that you saw a moment ago, is I'm going to go through now and create the meeting itself. So to do that, you quite simply choose the time when you would like the meeting to occur. You'll see here we can have different views, work week, the day view, and also the full week. And you can then also navigate between the different months and dates that you would like to schedule your online Teams meeting. I'm just going to stick with Wednesday for now. So to get started, very simply, I just simply click on the time that I would like. So you can see here it's picked up at 10:30 a.m. and I'm actually going to make this a 1-hour online tutorial. Give it a title. And again, this is whatever title you choose it to be. Now, if you do have a physical meeting location, you can also add it in here, but because we're going to be meeting online via Teams, I'm going to leave it blank. And then in the details section, this is where you can provide a bit of details in preparation, or you could also include other information here for your students. The last part you'll see is to invite the people themselves. And so this is where now when I invite a student, this will then send them a calendar invite with then the meeting join link that you saw before. So we can have Terry join us. We'll also get Adele along with Marsha. And lastly, let's also add in Douglas. And just like that, when I click schedule, be invited to this. You'll see here I simply click schedule. And just like that, it's now ready to join. So when I click the join button, that will take me to my online Teams meeting. And if I did want to share this more broadly, you can just simply copy that URL there. And that will then be a meeting join link that you can send. But as a rule of thumb, it is best to invite, and also what it allows you is the ability for them to receive the calendar invite to remind them that they need to be here at 10:30 a.m. to join us for this online tutorial. One of the other powerful things to keep in mind with a Teams meeting is you can see here I can always edit. So if I need to go back and add someone, I can add them after the fact. You also have the ability to invite anyone using their email address. Now, let's say in this example, I also want to have someone external to my organization join this online meeting because it's part of a real tutorial where we're going to talk about software development in the context of a local startup. And I'm going to actually invite a member of that startup to join this online Teams meeting. You can quite simply do that by typing in the email address. And so whether this is a Microsoft Outlook account, a Gmail account, Hotmail, or any other free email address, you simply type in their email address. So we'll go example. And you'll notice here, invite to the meeting. So what this will do is it will also then send an invite to that person, just like when you schedule an Outlook meeting invite. You can send an Outlook meeting invite to anyone. You can do exactly the same here with Teams. Now that person does not need to have access to Teams. They receive that meeting join link. They simply click it and then they can join in completely for free. Simply click update and that person now gets also invited to the meeting itself. Now, you'll see here, one other thing to be aware of is we have the ability to manage the meeting options. From meeting options, when I click on that, I have the ability to define who can actually present their screen, as well as also who can manage things like the recording. So you'll see here, if I only wanted to be presenting, I would click myself, but I want a collaborative back and forth with my students in this example. Last but not least is to make sure your device is ready by going up and clicking on my profile and then clicking on settings. This is where I can go through and double check my device, because the number one reason where people say, "Can you hear me? I can't hear you," is probably because you then haven't got the right speaker or microphone selected. So double check beforehand, and of course to double check that you have the right camera. And you'll also see here that I've got my microphone, and so this is where we can do a test to make sure everyone else will be able to hear me by clicking on Make a Test Call. Once you've made a test call, you're ready to do your online tutorial. Something to keep in mind is, of course, the type of device that you have. There are dedicated Teams meeting devices, which mean you can go into a conference room or a lecture theater or a classroom and have microphones and cameras that will make sure everyone is heard clearly and that there is a good visual experience. So if you would like to make sure that you check the types of devices depending on the room that you're in, if you go to office.com/Teams devices for more information. Now that we've set up our online tutorial meeting, what do we do during? So this is where I'm going to take you through three things: presenting content to the attendees who have joined that online tutorial, how can we record that session for later viewing, and the ability for us to collaborate together as part of this tutorial session itself. Heading back into Teams, you can see here we're now ready to start our meeting. And to begin, I simply go and click on the meeting invite itself and simply click on Join. When I click on Join, what you'll see here is again an opportunity to make sure I've got my audio and video on. So in this example, you can see here that I've got my camera isn't turned on. So hi there, everybody. You also can see here that I can even turn on background blur. So if you're working in, say, a shared office, this is where again you can now have a blurred background if you prefer it, as well as also whether or not you join with your microphone on. When I go through and click on Join Now, that will then bring me into the meeting itself. You'll see here right now, because this is a demonstration, we don't have video on for everyone because I'll be also helping to manage a few of the different users. But an important thing to keep in mind with Teams is that all members can have video on simultaneously. So that means if you have up to 250 people, all 250 people can have their video on. But what you will see is the most recent speakers appear here. So you can see the 4 video feeds of the people who have been the most active speaker. And as the 5th person now joins the conversation, the person who last spoke moves into then the trade along the bottom of the screen, and you'll see the next person then comes into the main view. So think about it just like when you are in a real conversation with someone in a group around the table, everyone's head will turn to the next person who has started the conversation. Just like that, you kind of think of it, it automatically brings in the person as well based on who is the most active speaker. Heading back over to Teams, you'll see here we're now inside of this meeting. And the first thing that we can do is see who has joined by clicking on the participants. And I can see in real time that Adele, Douglas, Marsha, and Terry have joined us together today. I've also got the ability to go through and start a recording. From that 3-dot ellipsis, that start recording will allow me to make this available on demand to my students after they're finished. You'll see here I can even turn on live captions, and I'll come back to this because it's very powerful. Again, if you want to create a more inclusive learning space, that we can now have those captions be automatically appearing on screen during the meeting itself. And of course, I can manage my background. You'll see here when I click on start recording, after the meeting, you can find this recording in the meeting chat or on Microsoft Stream. So Microsoft Stream is where the video will be automatically uploaded to, and I'll show you where that is a little bit later on. But for right now, you can see all of the attendees receive a notification that says you're recording, and everyone will see this red dot, and you can see here when I mouse over, it says Ken started the recording. Now, when I move out of this space, the biggest part is now that we're together, how do we start to actually go through some of the content that I'd like to be sharing virtually? You can see here when I click on the share tray, which is the rectangle in the center of the screen, that allows me to then share either everything on my desktop, individual windows, or again, I can even collaborate together in things like the whiteboard. Now, something to be aware of here, if you share everything on your desktop, that means people will see a view of all of the apps that are open. Now, this is fantastic. Let's say maybe if you want to show your students how to use a certain program like Photoshop, I can now share my desktop, and any app that I have running on my desktop, my students will now be able to see. But I just want my students to see a specific PowerPoint set of slides. You can see here, sharing the desktop is great if you're in a low bandwidth environment. When I click on share, what that will now do is it will load up in the screen. I can then click through the slides and now start having a conversation directly in the context of this material here. If I go over to the conversation space, this is where we can see conversations as they come through. And let me show you an example of that. You can see here on the right-hand side, that question will come through in the context of the conversation space. And I also receive a pop-up notification. Now, where I can then see here is Adele has asked a question related to the slide that is being presented, where she was asking about the ability to use cloud and local workloads together. So this is where I can then reply to Adele directly in the context here and say, yes, would be. Or alternatively, I could just continue the conversation and answer her question without needing to use the chat space by talking to the content, because all of my students can see and hear what I'm saying in real time while they are seeing the slides and the information being presented. Where this becomes particularly powerful is you'll see that, I'll come back. You'll see here that if I go over and say, well, not just me presenting content to my students, but what about if my students want to collaborate with me? And again, in an example of, say, a whiteboard. Now, the whiteboard gives us a collaborative space where I can ideate with my students, where I can explain how your computer via cellular towers, for example, sends information backwards and forth between databases which are connected through the internet. And this is then, of course, part of the context of our computer science tutorial that we're talking to. But the whiteboard could be used for anything: supply-demand curves, music theory, wherever you need a space to be able to ideate. We also have the ability to then work together collaboratively on documents. Now, you'll see I've stopped sharing my screen because one of my students has just posted a question, which is actually, can we discuss slide 2? And so right now, this is not content that I'm presenting. This is actually a slide deck one of my students has attached. And we can see here Douglas is wanting to discuss in this tutorial part of the project group that he and the fellow students are working on, which is a presentation. You'll see here when I go over and click on the document that he's attached to this conversation space, we'll actually be able to work together in real time on that document. So this is now not me just presenting. What this is allowing is for me to be able to talk to the students in real time and actually start to see how they're editing the document and even work through it with them together if that's the way you would like to teach your course itself. You'll see here, this allows me to also then go through and make edits. For example, if I wanted to update this to suggest that maybe they look at AR and VR, so in terms of augmented reality. But what's also quite powerful is because this is now PowerPoint Online, we can actually come together and work on this document in real time. And what you'll see here is I can now see that Douglas is also on this slide, and then Douglas can be working on, for example, the feedback that I've just given him, which is then to also add in the virtual reality and augmented reality. And so what that's just done is I can see in real time as it's then updating the edits that Douglas is making. And this is all still in the context of that online tutorial. Last but not least, I just double click to come back to it. And you can see here then we've been able to work together on documents. We've been able to then also have back and forth conversations. But the last part you'll see here is also we have the ability to go through and then what about creating a more inclusive experience? Or maybe I can't see the text on the screen so well and I'd like to adapt it to my own needs or even my own language requirements. And here we have what we call the immersive reader, which is built into Teams and allows me to then be able to see these comments in whatever visual requirements that I have. I can also translate the questions and text in the conversation space. So you'll see here when I open up the immersive reader, what this does is it allows me to be able to now see in what I require is the slightly larger or smaller font. This is available to every single student and every member of the meeting. They can come into the immersive reader and change the conversation space to their own visual requirements. And what we can even do, which is very, very powerful, is if, let's say, I want to translate the document to a language of choice. Let's go with German in this example. You can see here, I can then translate everything that was just posted. So this is where Teams becomes incredibly powerful as we take advantage of some of the inclusive and accessible technologies that we have built into it and the entire Office 365 suite. All right, we're at the end of the tutorial, and the last thing to do is go over and click on Stop Recording. Now when I do that, that will then be a recording of everything that has occurred since I pressed Start Recording, and will be made available on demand only to a part of this meeting itself. So you'll see here, I'll just click on Stop Recording, and then I get a confirmation. And you'll see then this will become available in the conversation space. Heading back to the slides now to go to the last phase of us having our online meeting, and that is what happens afterwards. We're going to now have a look at how do we manage the recording, view the meeting chat and files, and to continue to collaborate with the meeting attendees. Now, where does the meeting recording go? Well, that's part of Office 365, and that goes into a service to Microsoft Stream. So you'll see here, anytime you click Save Recording in Teams, it saves to Stream. Now, Stream has automatic upload, so what that means is that it is provided available on demand to the attendees. You also can have automated closed captions. Now that is only in a limited set of supported languages for now, but what you'll see here is that will increase over time from English to other languages. And what's very powerful is it creates a searchable transcript, really useful to be able to then jump to keywords throughout then the recording itself. For those who have not used Stream before, it is free for education. It has the ability to support up to 500,000 total videos inside of your organization, and each video can be up to 50 gigabytes in size. So very, very powerful, available to you. And for more details on what the limits are of Microsoft Stream, simply search Microsoft Stream limits into a search engine. Going back into Teams to see what this looks like, simply click on the meeting recording. This is then available for them on demand through Microsoft Stream. The fantastic thing about Stream is it also is enhanced with artificial intelligence, allowing it to then have captions automatically generated. And then we can even jump to different points in the transcript. So I was using the word conversation, and you'll see here, whenever that word was used, I can then jump to the 3 minutes and 53 seconds when I was referring to the student asking me a question in the conversation space, and I was then answering that topic itself. Now, when I want to go through and then also manage this video, if I want to maybe share that with others, I can simply click on the 3-dot ellipsis and opens up Microsoft Stream. Stream being part of Office 365, you'll find it in the app launcher in that top left-hand side. So of course you can always jump back to your emails and other parts of Office 365. And you'll see here that I can, if need to, edit the transcript. If the AI maybe did not correctly recognize a name, you can then always go back and then update it correctly within the transcript. Now that you've seen how to use a Teams meeting to do an online meetup and the steps to prepare before, I want to thank everyone for their time today, and that concludes our session for today. Thank you.